Now, I'm Jordan Glasner. I'm a product manager on the infrastructure product line. I kind of split my time between Terraform and Packer, and a lot of context switching, as you can tell by my outfit. I'll pass it over to my partner here, Olena, who kind of runs the engineering side of the house as well.
Thank you, Jordan. Apparently, I didn't get the memo to match colors, so I look like a boundary person. I'm sorry, love boundary. But my name is Olena. I'm an engineering manager for Packer. And today, we're not going to talk about purple, blue, or red. We're going to talk about gold. And particularly, we will talk about golden image factories.
And of course, we had to sneak in one meme. This is actually the only one legal would get us through. It does not even really count. I wanted to get my dog up there, but a black lab just really wasn't doing it for us. And so when we talk about the golden image factory, it really is about standardization and bringing these standards across your organization. And what we want to do here is bake in all the security requirements and operational requirements that your company has into an image that can then be socialized around your company. Things like the operating system, hardening settings, monitoring and logging agents, and any of the different things that are important to your business. Instead of relying on your practitioners to do that themselves, we'll bake it directly into this golden image, and then as you'll see, we'll socialize it via HCP Packer. And as we started building out this product over the last year and a half, we often see the same workflow happening over and over again in the wild. We have a team that's managing a set of golden images, usually 2 to 3 images. If you're talking about Unix, unfortunately, if you spread out and go into the Windows world, you're usually talking about 20, 25, 100. But it's still the same workflow where we build these images, we validate them either through automated testing or just point and click ops as we validate everything's happening. And then we have to figure out a way to distribute these and how our end users can actually consume these, hopefully via Terraform. And finally, we have the end of the life cycle where we have either new images coming into it, or we have maybe a regression or something that's happening, and we have to decommission this. And how do we tell everyone that there is a new image ready to go? And there's a few challenges we've seen common across whether you're talking about a company of 3 or 4 or a giant bank that's managing hundreds or thousands of applications. These processes are often siloed and often manual. And so what we see is different teams building these images on their own without code, often doing this just on the command line. Once they have it up, they're going to publish it into their cloud of choice. And we often see people tracking these, amazingly enough, with spreadsheets. And anytime you see a spreadsheet, there is an opportunity. So really, we're seeing a lack of standardization and visibility across the industry here. When you look here, it's just a giant mess, right? We have a golden base image that we're distributing that our security team has built. We might pass that over to the billing team, and they're going to layer on their pieces that they need, the marketing team, the R&D team. And what we end up is this giant collection of images without any visibility, either what's being used or what's out there even available for practitioners to take advantage. And what we see finally is this gap between image factories, like their CI/CD pipelines that are building these images with Packer or something else, and then how you're provisioning them, ideally through Terraform Cloud or Enterprise. And that's really where HCP Packer fits in, right here in the middle to polish out the workflow between these teams that are building these images and your end users that want to be provisioning. And what you see here is us just going through the standard infrastructure as code workflow, starting with our Packer template. Here we're distributing a version of Debian. We're going to run a Packer build. With just a couple of environment variables, we're able to configure that existing Packer pipeline, and instead of it just being out there on its own, it'll start talking to the registry. And every image that is built through that pipeline will now be tracked specifically, and your Terraform users will be able to find those. Again, we see a direct link in the Terraform Cloud. And the HCP Packer really is the foundation of this multi-cloud golden image pipeline, where we have visibility of all the iterations, both the ones that are currently active, which ones are revoked, and of course, where they are out in the world. Now, they slugged this really dense slide in here, so I'm not even going to try to read it. But what you need to remember, again, is that HCP Packer sits in between your existing Packer workflows, these ones that are building the images. We don't replace that command line. What we do is just connect into it and extend the experience for you, giving you that visibility and hooks into it to build other pipelines around it. And finally, what we see here is us coming back through here and finishing up this gap in the provisioning infrastructure with being able to use this data source on the Terraform side that can actually query the registry in real time to make sure your practitioners are always pulling in the latest compliant image. And how we do that most specifically with Packer and HCP Packer is this new idea of channels. So no longer do we just have a bucket of images and you can go out there and find the latest and pull it in. Instead, we're going to control access and socialize these with channels. We have users that are using the latest channel and making sure that's always available, but more importantly, doing things like staging and production and channels. And once you've actually tested these images, validated that they're ready to go and be distributed in the organization, you're able to publish these up to the channels, and then they're instantly available to your Terraform users on the other side. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Olena, who actually gets into the complicated stuff, and I'll stop hand-waving for a little bit.
Thank you, Jordan. What an amazing crash course into HCP Packer, and Golden workflow. Are we ready for actual demo in action?
Yes.
But before we dive in, I just want to feel the room and understand, are you guys with us still? Please raise hands if you are actively using open source Packer right now in your current workflow. Oh yeah, all right, quite a lot. All right, the second question will be, how many of you are generally heard about HCP Packer and perhaps even tried it out? Oh, okay, also quite a lot. Nice, quite educated audience, so that's going to be easy. So, but for those of you who are not familiar with Packer or HCP Packer, please go to our learning guides, HashiCorp Learn. Our amazing education team pull it up together for you to use it. And in case, like, if you need to fill up any gaps going forward. So, obviously, when we're talking about Golden Image Factory workflow, we want to start from actually building the image. As Jordan said before, most of the time before, you might use some manual process in order to build, like you bring up the VM, you provision all of your settings, and you let it run. But there is a Packer right now to help us to build those images automated. And what Packer is the tool that helps us to build multiple images for multiple clouds from the single source of configuration. And talking about configuration, in case you don't know, starting from Packer 1.7 version, we are on the HCL, and JSON is still there for now, but we mainly use HCL, and we're going to focus, and we'll do all of the configuration today on HCL. So for the purpose of the demo, we're gonna run our pipeline, and we will build the Ubuntu image, and deploy it and provision it to AWS and GCP. So you will start, of course, from your Packer config. Everything starts from the Packer config. Starting from AWS, regular things, probably the people who are practitioners and who use this very often use this, understand. You define your source, you define your Amazon source, different parameters, region, whatever you need to get in. Same for GCP, right? Well, nothing new at this point. I think we're kind of on the same page right now. But let's talk about the actual magic. And the magic is integration with the HCP Packer Registry. And in order to achieve that magic, that integration, what you need to do is just to add into the building block few attributions inside the HCP Packer Registry block, where you will define your bucket name, which nothing but the image name. And that image name should be unique for this specific config, because that is a grouping of all of your versions of this specific image. Description, just a basic description, which will tell you what this image for. In our case, we build in Golden Image, of course. And the other part is, which is actual nice feature, is metadata, and it's purely customizable metadata. You can put everything that you want, either on a higher bucket level general image, or even per build, right? It can be any software that you installed. In our case, we put in the version of Ubuntu that we're running, the flag that is a Golden Image, that it passes all the compliance, and that is the config that we need to get in order to provision our Golden Image pipeline into HCP Packer Registry. So next, what is next? Definitely we want to build it within the pipeline, right? We want to automate it, because the automation is what actually drives us and help us build resilient pipeline. So of course, first of all, you want to set up your GitHub repository, right? You want to set up a separate GitHub repository for your Golden Image. Once you set it up, you push your config, you trigger the build, it runs the execution. it tests the image, and that magic code is actually, after the build is executed, it pushes all of the metadata about the image to the HCP Packer Registry, right, with a new version. After that, when the image is built, the image is successfully built, you will want to probably run some additional tests. You want to make sure that it's compliant, right? When it's latest, it doesn't mean that it's greatest yet, right? But so as Jordan mentioned, we have this concept of channels. And what channel does is, those are, again, very customizable. For the sake of demo, we created the channel called stable, meaning you can go on the HCP Packer platform to Packer and promote the iteration or the version that just been pushed by Packer and assign it to the stable channel. And that is additional magic that helps you down the line, and you will see how it's going to be used. But what it does, again, you get the iteration, you assign it to a channel, and then you make sure that that iteration is going to be usable down the line. And let me show you how it's going to be used down the line. So now, Terraform configuration. Before you might have automated way, jumping through the hoops, getting the AMI, or worst case scenario, you had it hard-coded. For now, with the HCP Packer, life is getting a little bit easier. What you can use is to get the HCP provider and install the data source. And what it does, as you can see, it mentions the bucket name and the specific channel name. The important note that I should have mentioned that within the channel, you only can have one iteration, meaning when you specify this in the Terraform config, you will pull in the latest and the greatest iteration that been promoted to the channel that you want to consume it for. Then, easy stuff, you remove your hard-coded AMIs, and within your regular source block of, in this example, AWS, you just get the output of image ID that's been returned by the HCP data source. Easy stuff, right? So now, after we get the config, we build it, we test it out, we make sure it's stable and compliant, and we promote it to a stable channel, and we deploy it. When we run Terraform apply, because of that magic code that was baked into Terraform, it automatically gets the image ID, and uses this for your infrastructure. And of course, it creates it, it adds it. It's first time deploy, successfully created one resource, 0 destroyed, base case scenario, awesome. Next thing is, if you guys were attending Armand's keynote, you're probably familiar with the concept of run tasks. And of course, HCP Packer integrated with run task and provides additional layer of compliance check for your images if you use in Terraform Cloud. It's super easy to set up on the Terraform Cloud. I'm not going to give into much details. But when you set it up, you will have two methods of provisioning, I should say. One is advisory, which means if run task fails, the run will still continue. And mandatory means if run task will fail, that means your Terraform apply will be stopped, fully stopped. Right, so that's your guardrail, kind of the way of Sentinel policy enforcement thing. Then, when you set up your run task, if you trigger the run within the Terraform Cloud, post-plan, but before they apply, run task will get executed. And what it does on the back, it will talk to HCP Packer server. It will give it all of the Terraform plan output. We will scan it. We will figure out what AMIs are there. Are they compliant? Do we track them with HCP Packer? Are there hard-coded AMIs? Are those hard-coded AMIs actually exist in HCP Packer? So it does a lot of validation that then will be returned to Terraform Cloud and will be displayed for you. In this case, very easy. We build a new image, is the only one, it's compliant, all good, nothing to worry about. Again, it's the regular workflow, day 0, deployment, easy stuff. But you will ask, what about the updating the images? That's where actual magic and all of the automation should happen. And I would say, well, reuse the same pipeline, right? We don't have hard-coded AMIs anymore. We don't have to tweak and change multiple file, Packer config, Terraform config. Now, if you need to change your hardening settings on your golden AMI, if you need to change any configuration, you just push that into the GitHub. Infrastructure is code, right? It's as simple as that. And run the same workflow, right? Push the code, trigger the build. It will build the new image. It will run the automation to test that image. Then we can promote it to the stable channel if we are sure about the security of that image. And afterwards, well, same. We use Terraform apply. And in this case, since we already deployed the infrastructure and we published the new image to the HCP Packer, during the Terraform run, you will see that it detects the new image ID and, well, tries to replace it, and in the end, and in the end, if you can see, it creates one new resource and destroys the previous one that was created before. Again, everything beautiful. We have our initial deployment. We have our update automated. But life is not rainbows and unicorns. Sometimes this thing happens. And security vulnerabilities are not fun to deal with. But you know what? I have a good news. We got you covered on this one. We created the workflow that helps you to remediate all of the problems that related to vulnerability on the golden base image with the HCP Packer. So the first thing that you want to do is so-called revoke our compromised golden image. And you can do that simply by going to our front end, click the revoke the image, select revoke to specific date, and you specifically want to use for future date. In the meantime, you prepare, you fix all of the stuff that you need to fix in order to push the new patch, security patch into your image. In this example, right, like in our case, we scheduled the revocation for tomorrow, right? So if any time I will run my Terraform run, this is the run task example. If I run it today, image is scheduled to revoke. It's not yet revoked, but if we do a run, Terraform run task will tell us that one resource was scanned, and it's scheduled to revoke, but it still can be used because we have not built a new image yet. We don't have published the patch, right? And fast forward for tomorrow, I know we don't want HashiCorp to end because it's tomorrow, but let's imagine we run Terraform run in the Terraform Cloud tomorrow at the time where the image should be revoked. At this time, we receive the failure, and it says that image is not compliant, it's been revoked, and, well, yet we have not built a new one, right? So let's take care of that, and I guess you guys know what happened next, right? We used the same pipeline after we remediated and fixed the push for our security vulnerability, right? We improved our hardening setting, hopefully added some more tests in order to make sure it's covered in the future for the regression. Same workflow, build, test, promote to stable, consume with Terraform, and yeah. I mean, I think that's not bad, but we do have a couple of ifs.
There's a few ifs. But what if we took this same idea of being able to pull in the latest image and didn't do it from Terraform, but we actually brought that to Packer itself? And that's what we've done now by bringing data sources to Packer open source, the first one being the one for the HCP registry. And so what this does is really bring the dream of immutable infrastructure and gives us this one workflow for doing that, mapping from Packer all the way to Terraform. This is something we've heard Armand talk about for years now. I think when I first joined, this is one of the first whiteboards I watched, talking about cattle versus pets. You know, those previous examples were deploying things versus Terraform, but then to get our actual application on there, we have to use something like Chef or Ansible to actually interact with those images or those instances and actually push code to them. But what if we actually built those into the images and we're able to push those on every deploy, have our latest image? And that's what really immutable infrastructure is all about. And so what we can do now, in the previous example we were looking at, we have the new Ubuntu version. We bake that into a golden image that our platform team is pushing out to everyone. However, now instead of the billing and marketing departments going and just installing software on that later on with Chef, what they can do now is pull in that latest image into their Packer file, which Olena will show you here in a second, with the data source, and that same magic happens. We can use those channels to always pull in the latest one, whether we're trying to do something for testing. We can have a staging channel where we pull the latest one in, but we don't socialize it to all the developers. And once we've done our testing, we push it up to stable. Same code-free updates will happen inside of Packer now. So on those immutable images that are pulling in the golden image via the data source, all they have to do is rerun their pipeline. You don't actually have to go into GitHub and change code and go rerun it. We just push one button, it'll pull in the latest one, and now we have a compliant immutable image that our application developers can deploy immediately. So again, this is all meant to enable, to be able to build and deploy these applications as immutable images on top of that secure golden image. And this is actually what you can do today. We introduced at GA this new data source that goes into Packer in version 1.7, and you can actually take advantage of this stuff. And Olena, you'll show us how.
Yeah, easy stuff. I mean, we listen to Armand, right? We listen to Jordan. So everything that I've done with the deployment of golden image doesn't really make sense, because if we deploy golden image, right, then we'll have to go manually and deploy our application on top of it, which we don't want, right? So we want to break the cycle and build another pipeline for our web server, for our applications, that will have all of the baked-in configuration that needed for this specific server, right? And since we already have a golden image, which is nice, tested, right, and we're sure about it, now we can reuse it across all of our applications and servers, as Jordan said. And as he mentioned, right, it's kind of deja vu if you think about it, because it's the same way how we use data sources inside the Terraform config. When the Terraform pulls in the iterations from the HCP Packer to deploy, the same way Packer, open source Packer, pulls in the latest and greatest, in our case, latest and stable, a golden image to build on top of, right? And then we use that as a source image to build on top of your application or the web server. How it works in the background, a little more details. When you push your config for your web server, also in the repository, when it runs Packer build, Packer sees the HCP Packer data source, talks to HCP Packer server, checks, hey, give me the stable iteration that you have, right? It's only one, because you only can assign one version into the channel. It returns exactly that iteration. It returns also your image ID, which then being used in order to build your web server on top of it. And in the end of the run, it actually creates a different image, right? And with the same process, if we set up our magic to talk to HCP registry, it will push that image into different bucket. Very important, right? Because we don't want to mix up and put it in the golden image bucket, right? We create our application or web server, whatever you want to call it, and we push it into HCP Packer, right? Now we have a separate bucket and separate pipeline that will follow and track all of the versions that you will push to it. Pretty much the same workflow, right? If you want to, pretty much the same workflow. If you want to use this down the line in order to in order to provision it with a Terraform, right? Same process. You'll have to promote after you make sure that image is stable and tested. You want to promote it to the channel stable, whatever channel you want to call it. You promote it, and then downstream, all of the applications going to use it. But now you will probably ask a question of, if we build the image on top of the image, and then we probably can use that image and build another image on top of it, right? How do we actually track that? That creates a quite complicated and tricky dependency chain of images, and we would like to have an visibility for it.
And that's what we're working on right now, actually. Again, I mentioned at GA, we brought the idea of a data source to Packer, allowing you to dynamically source these parent images. But what we're doing now is bringing ancestry tracking and visibility into the HCP Packer application. I don't know if you all have gotten really into the internals of how ancestry is done with Packer. It's rather complicated, it turns out. A certain image can have multiple parents, multiple children, and then you have those lines going all the way down. And it's really hard, especially if you're talking about a spreadsheet, to keep a track of all this. And so what we're doing, again, automatically tracking all these after you've added those environment variables, and we're tracking the relationships between all these images and giving that visibility directly inside of the UI. And so what you see here is what the team is actively developing now. We're going to have in a private beta soon. I should mention that we're not quite to the call to action, but please do reach out either via the HCP portal or through your account managers if you have those. We are going to be looking for people that are interested in this, people that are already down the immutable workflow path and want to have more visibility into this. This will be coming out next month in a private beta and then coming shortly to a public beta. But what you see here, when you go to any image now, and we actually have this as a live version on behind a feature flag internally, you can see the parents and the children, and then we're talking about the children of those images. We can see at one glance all the ones and if they're updated or not. So are they using that latest iteration that's been pushed to stable, or are they using some old out-of-date version, or even worse, a revoked version? And now we have one single place to find that where we didn't have this visibility before.
And the same, I should say, about the revocation workflow, because if you find a vulnerability on your golden image, right, you will want to probably remediate all of the children's as well in order to, make sure it's secure and nice.
And being the product manager I am, I had to come up with a name for that. So we call that multi-tier revocation. It's actually visually consistent, and we'll be launching immediately with this new feature. And let's just go back over again with HCP Packer and what it does for you. Again, tracking and having that visibility of all the golden images, key, and what seems like just a small feature is really amazing once you go take that jump from a spreadsheet to having a live updated database of everything that's happening. We can see where these images have been deployed. We control access to these images via channels, making sure our practitioners are only pulling in the latest, most secure images. And again, coming very soon, we'll be able to see the relationships between these images, both the parents and the children, of course the grandchildren and the grand-grandchildren, as far as down as you all want to take it. I really appreciate you all coming down here. You'll excuse us. I think I missed the timing by 2 minutes. That's what happens when I get a little anxiety and I start speaking fast. This is actually as slow as I can humanly speak. But if this is all interesting to you, please do reach out either via this QR code or the URL that's listed. Honestly, you can just Google HCP Packer. What we do have now on the HCP platform, which is our new SaaS platform, we have HCP Packer, HCP Vault, and Consul on there. You can actually sign up for a free account, get trial credits, play along with this. What I didn't mention, for the smaller use cases, we actually have a free tier of HCP Packer now. So as long as you're tracking less than 10 images and doing less than maybe 1,000 different deploys a month, you can actually have this information for free. So please do check it out. We're going to be here open for questions right now. If anyone does have it, please just raise your hand and we'll kind of talk a little bit more about it. Either HCP Packer or Terraform, or please don't ask about Vault.
Thank you, Jordan. I wanted to ask the two of you, are there any plans to open up the ability to run your own registry?
I think the mic might be turned out. It could be where I'm standing. It's hard to hear.
Yeah.
Are you planning on opening up to the public after the beta to allow us to run our own registry?
Well, as far as like run it on-prem? Is that what you mean, or just use the product itself?
On-prem, private cloud.
But manage your own, similar like a Terraform Enterprise.
Exactly.
Yeah, not currently. The way we built this is really dependent on the HCP platform, and so it's not something we can bring on-prem. Now, we have talked to a lot of Terraform Enterprise customers, for instance, that are running this on-site. It is a very simple kind of network piece that you have to open up to allow Terraform Enterprise to talk to HCP Packer, including with that run task. Now, depending on how kind of secure and regulated you are, the conversation we usually have with customers is the fact that this is only a metadata registry. And so they're able to say, okay, we can take that. It's not actually hosting the actual images. Those are still where they always were. It's just another layer upon that. And so that's how we've gotten through some of those security conversations.
Hey, Olena. Hey, Jordan. Great presentation. Thank you. I might have missed an aspect of the testing side. Testing the image, really important. Is there the possibility to inject other tooling into that aspect? So, you know, there's a lot of tools out there that will really do all of your security scanning and vulnerabilities specializing in that. Is that possible to integrate?
Oh, that's actually an interesting question. I think for that reason, I waited a little bit. Oh gosh, it's super loud. Sorry. For that reason, like for testing, there's a multiple tools. There's a different way of doing this, right? Within the HCP Packer, we don't really have that ability, right? But again, because it's a GitHub pipeline, right? Like you can automate and write scripts that will test the image and will pick it up from the HCP registry and run of the testing that you need to do for your golden image or further down the line with your application images built on top.
I will add one thing that I mentioned earlier, kind of legal slapped me a little bit with our slides, and they've kind of pulled back on what we can talk about the future, right? Yeah. But we are looking to build more governance tools into the system, specifically around provisioners. These are things we've talked about in the past, but an idea of enforced provisioners. So provisioners can do a lot of things with Packer, but one thing a lot of people do is automated testing with them. Yeah. And so having the ability to put these at the registry level and say any Packer pipeline that's connected to the registry must run these provisioners is a path we're going to be taking towards the end of this year.
Grammarly, Serhiy Vasylenko from Grammarly. I was really impressed by this, by all these features. I have a kind of use case question. Is it possible to create an image, then put some kind of pause, so my security operations team will check that and validate, and they put the OK, and only after that, I promote a new image as a stable or whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That's why you can, again, you can test automation test, right? That's why it's not baked into the pipeline. You can make it automated with the API call, right? But you also can pause it, right? You can have only your pipeline that runs build and then tests, right? And from then it pushes it to the HCP Packer. When it pushes it to HCP Packer, it's just latest version, but it's not in the channel, right? In the consumption, that was, I'm sorry if I didn't get the message straight, the main way and the workflow that we try to get is to consume from the channels that you create, and you customize those channels based on the workflow, right? So then you can go manually on the platform and promote it when you're ready, or again, build another pipeline that will do an API call and promote that image to the channel that you wish for.
That's awesome, thank you. And I suppose that API also exists there, so I can use some tokens to interact with.
Exactly. We do have API documentation as well. Google HCP Packer, there is the API docs and all of the information about authorization.
Thank you.
You covered it.
Hello. Hi. Sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry if I missed this before, but has it got any capability to manage any other artifacts other than just images, or is there any plan for it to manage other artifacts?
It's funny you asked that. When we started naming it, we went through a lot of different renditions of what this thing was called. And internally, for about those first 8 months, it was called the Artifact Registry, to be honest with you. That is what Packer generates. We talk all about machine images because we really want to nail down that workflow, and it is the one we see most used with Packer. But what you're going to see us move into the other artifacts that Packer can create.
So this would be a competitor eventually to something like JFrog Artifactory? Okay.
Correct. The biggest difference right now is the fact that we do not store these images, right? We're just a metadata registry on top of it. However, we do have customers today that are layering on the registry on top of Artifactory to get that really polished Terraform workflow for their practitioners. I guess I should mention, you can actually use the registry today to track Docker builds. It is built into the Packer plugin. It's just not something, again, we talk about because it makes it easier to have one message versus trying to talk about all the things that Packer can do, which there are a lot.
Yeah.
Hello, Natalie Godek from Babylon. How do these images get, so when you promote to stable or something, how do these images get to different regions and accounts if you're using multiple AWS accounts, multiple GCP projects? How do they physically get into those regions?
This is this is really something that's solved with Packer open source and post processors. You have the ability to push these things up. It's actually something we've heard from a number of customers because it is a bit tedious, especially when you're talking about like hundreds of regions. And so I think it's something we want to look at. Please do. I'd like to talk a little bit later if you have some ideas there, because I think it's something we need to look at in the future.
Yeah. I'm late to find the config, but yeah. I don't think that I have a snapshot for it.
Dmitry Leventent, you mentioned that it will be possible to see where images are used. Would it be some integration with actual accounts, or is it somehow on top of Terraform Cloud?
The first version of this is something that's going to be a direct integration with Terraform Cloud. What we're going to be doing, the run tasks we looked at before, right, is looking at the plan output and seeing what changes are coming. We're going to have state introspection as well. And so what we'll be able to do is have links from Terraform Cloud and or HCP Packer back and forth on the specific workspaces where these images are deployed. You also have the audit trail where you can see all these queries coming in and where they're going if you need something a little bit more robust. But that we are really focused in on that Terraform integration and polishing that out.